I'll tell you what we're going to do to start with. We're going to welcome to the show Director of Wellbeing Economy Alliance Aotearoa, former Aotearoa New Zealand Green Party MP Gareth Hughes. Gareth, good evening to you.
Yeah, kia ora korua, gents.
How are you, man? Doing well? Since
doing really well.
leaving, how dare you leave Dunedin? I mean, what happened? Gosh, left Dunedin, left us all abandoned.
Yeah, I could have stayed down there for a bit longer, but my whānau was pretty keen to get back to Poneke, Wellington, and we spent 3 years down there, and we actually loved it. And the thing I miss is I actually swam in the sea for like 4 months straight. The last summer we were there, haven't swum in the sea since.
Oh wow! All right, cool. Hey, well, listen, we've got you on for a couple of reasons. Obviously, you were, but you call yourself kind of an independent now. I think I read a story where you've got no party affiliation. Is that as you stand today?
Yeah. So when I helped set up the Wellbeing Economy Alliance Aotearoa, I want to sort of persuade and talk to all parties, and I thought that would be easier if I wasn't a member. But I'm also really enjoying doing a bit of commentary. I sort of noticed a lot of the commentators I noticed were kind of really like Team Blue, Team Red, and wouldn't really acknowledge when their team maybe didn't do the right thing. So I'm trying to just be genuinely independent and say when people do good things and point out when I think they're maybe not.
I think you've been reading the script for Big Hairy News here a little bit, Gareth, from the sounds of things. But you were involved with the Green Party, you were involved with Parliament, and obviously there's big news, especially for our audience. It's unquestionable that our audience is obviously swinging left. It's where we put ourselves pretty clearly. But like yourself, we hopefully play balls and strikes, or call balls and strikes, as they say. But one of the big news stories over the weekend, I think it might have actually cracked on Friday. They always crack on Friday. We don't do a show on Friday, and they always crack, was Darleen Tana. And it's been going over the weekend. So what I think we'll do to start with is we'll just play, it's just 90 seconds of the story off One News tonight, and then want to get your feedback on it. But also, one of the big parts, I know you've been in the media today talking about waka jumping, is to maybe just drill down what this is and should the Greens use it, albeit they haven't wanted to, or haven't actually, no one's ever used it. And historically, the Greens have been very, very anti-waka jumping. So let's just have a look at the story first of all, and then we'll have a chat.
A former worker at the centre of a migrant exploitation case involving former Green MP Darleen Tana says he's been left destroyed. It comes as party co-leader Chloe Swarbrick considers using the waka jumping legislation to force her from Parliament. Political editor Mikey Sherman has developments.
This is Santiago Parma in happier times 2 years ago.
This is my third day here.
Working for Darleen Tana's family e-bike business, unaware of the toll it would take on his life.
It's a lot. Now I am financially destroyed, emotional destroyed, and so tired, and stress. It's a stress to stay in the media.
Today he visited One News wanting to speak out about the MP.
It's quite an interesting thing that they just did. They're just for you media geeks out there like me and Chewy. See how One News actually said he came to us to talk. They wanted to make it very clear that we did not go seeking this scuttlebutt. He came to us. I think that was purposefully written that way to kind of go, he's come to tell his story, take it as you will. Probably because there's still some disagreement between, I guess, Darleen Tana and the Greens as to what the accusations were and weren't, maybe.
She stay in the business. She do the payments. She managed the business.
Darleen Tana refutes all allegations, but having seen the independent report, her former co-leader is furious.
Yeah, I mean, I've been really straight up about the fact that I feel betrayed, to be honest with you.
Darleen Tana has resigned from the Greens, but not from Parliament, leading to talk of what's known as the waka jumping law, allowing a party to request an MP be booted out. It's legislation created by New Zealand First, and Winston Peters says the Greens should use it against Tana.
Who they say should not be there, not fit, well then put it to the test right here, right now, by forcing her to resign.
For the Greens, it's complicated. The party was born after Jeanette Fitzsimons and Rod Donald ditched the alliance, so they hate the waka jumping law.
So there you go. Now, Gareth, maybe we can start. Should we start there, or should we start with talking about Darleen Tana? Why don't we just quickly go over what is the waka jumping law, and is this a place that the Greens could or would use it?
You want to go right back to the start?
Sure. We're here. Yeah. We're waiting. All ears.
Well, I mean, so when we moved elections systems, the 90s to MMP in 96, there was a huge amount. 22 MPs were switching parties in the run up to that. And it was deeply unpopular with the public, right? Because it looked like rats leaving sinking ships and all of that.
Right.
So in the early 2000s, Jim Anderson was the prime driver of it. Winston Peters was a big supporter because he had a whole bunch of MPs defect in the Jenny Shipley, Jim Bolger government. But it was Jim Anderson who really strove to get this made into law, and it became a law in 1999, but it had a sunset clause. It automatically expired in 2005. Back then, and when I was living down south, I wrote a history of the Green Party and a biography of the first co-leader, the late Jeanette Fitzsimons, and I read all the speeches they were going through Parliament at that time, and the Greens were staunch opponents of this waka jumping. I call it party hopping because why we racialize, waka jumping and make that a bad thing. So I call it party hopping. They were vocally opposed to it because what they saw it was sort of domineering leaders like Jim Anderson and Winston Peters who wanted to get their way, wanted to dominate the caucuses. And they were opposed to it because it stifles free speech of MPs. We've already got some of the most powerful the most powerful parties in a democracy in the Western world at the moment. There's very little crossing the floor, very little examples of MPs speaking out, and that's exactly what waka jumping encourages. So Alamein Kopu was the victim of this in, I think, 2003, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court. Tariana Turia also faced it when she set up the Māori Party, but it lapsed, right? And then it wasn't until 2018 when Winston Peters got it back in there that the Greens ended up actually voting for it, despite calling it a dead rat. And now we're sort of in this position where the Greens are considering invoking, or at least not ruling it out. But this is after decades of opposition to it and not using it last term with Elizabeth Kerekere when they had the opportunity.
So it can be used. The question is, will it be used? And as you say, the Greens haven't been a fan of it in the past. I guess a lot of that comes back. Now we go to the full circle to Darleen Tana and what she's done. It's a fascinating part of the political world that someone who has not got an electorate seat can get brought into Parliament on a list, then be, for want of a better word, kicked off that list, and then just become an independent and stay in government. I guess two sides. You want to be able to protect people from not just going, oh, by the way, we don't like you, you're off the list and you're out of Parliament. But this would be the other side of that coin, which seems a bit peculiar as well.
Yeah, and I acknowledge there is another side of the coin. And it's something Jeanette Fitzsimons used to always say. You can't actually legislate for your legislators to have integrity. You have to kind of depend on their conscience and the public pressure. So look, even if the Greens didn't invoke it and Tana hypothetically stayed as an independent MP, I can't think of a more horrific life that Tana would experience. I saw that with Brendan Horan, who defected from New Zealand First. Recently, we saw Gaurav Sharma from Labour. These are kind of really deeply sad, isolated individuals who kind of don't do anything, and then they get all the flack from the media for taking the salary but not really doing much. And you can't really achieve much as an independent in the circumstances that, say, Tana or Brendan Horan entered. So look, I wouldn't wish that lifestyle on my worst enemy.
Yeah. Chewy, we should talk about the actual process as we heard it. I think we were talking last night and you gave a bit of an outline as to what you understood happened and how it happened. Do you want to share it with us all?
So my understanding of the timeline is obviously Greens have been waiting on this report to be generated, and they were very much like, hey, we're going to, in the interest of natural justice, we're just going to let this play out and see what's delivered to us. My understanding is that they got that report on Friday evening. They had a caucus meeting on Saturday morning with Tana there to, I guess, answer it. And then the caucus unanimously decided to remove her from the Green Party. But that leaves the ball in her court of whether she resigns from Parliament. There's been a statement, I don't have it to hand, where she's just basically denying everything and saying that it's just a beat up and the Greens always had this in mind, that it isn't a full and fair process. And then there's just been statements of like, do the right thing and resign.
So this is part of the statement. In the statement tonight, this is last night, I think, Tana said she'd received a copy of the report on Saturday morning and attended a caucus meeting that day where it was discussed. Quote, "I do not feel that natural justice has been followed during this process, and at Saturday's hui, it seemed clear that a predetermined view had been formed prior to hearing from me. Onwards, she said, I want to make it clear that I do not accept the findings of the report and believe that it substantially misrepresents the level of my involvement in my husband's business." So just to follow on from what you said, Chewy, that's
and I think another factor of it is, I believe, due to privacy reasons, it's up to her to allow the release of the report to the public. I'm not 100% sure on that.
I've heard, Chewy, that it might have actually been in that report that the Greens are going to release an executive summary, but not the full report. Now, that feels problematic because, as we've always said, maybe you can speak to this, Gareth, the Greens seem to be the most open and transparent group of any lot, the way they do things. And of course, we're all still going to Mr. Lux, and hey, where's that Uffindale report that you promised to give us? So, do you understand what needs to happen to get that released into the public, Mike? Because I'm assuming that, especially because the Greens are standing behind this report so much and using it as the reason for them taking action, they'll want everybody to see it.
Yeah, and this is the problem they're in, right? Is that it's basically a he said, she said situation where the report's contested, but we in the media can't make up our minds independently because we haven't seen it. So I think the Greens historically have always been held to a higher standard because often they are the champions for transparency. And look, I can't remember for sure, but I'm sure they would have been calling for the Uffindale report to be released, or Green members at least. Look, I'm a little bit surprised that they didn't sort of get their ducks in a row and maybe talk to the other individuals mentioned in the executive summary, get their permission weeks when it was shared for consultation initially, to get their permission to issue it publicly at the same time as making this announcement. I think that would have been a lot cleaner, and it would have not been this messy situation we find ourselves in. But this is the situation the Greens find themselves in. So, you know, I'm sure they'll be trying to urge to get the report out sooner rather than later, because it's a real grey area and it's really murky, which means both sides can sort of claim points and make arguments on the back of it. I understand Tana could release it as well. But I guess the other complicating factor is I understand News Talk ZB has a copy of it that it's been leaked to. So it may get out there anyway without sort of any of those privacy protections or redactions if they were ever going to happen. So, yeah, just a little bit messy.
I mean, I wouldn't mind also speaking to, obviously you're not a part of them, but to the Greens in and of themselves and what they'd be going through and feeling at the moment. I mean, you think about this year, you've got James Shaw resigning. You've got the situation with Goriz. You've got the situation with Julianne Genter crossing the floor and screaming, that one. Marama's health diagnosis. Afisa Collins passing, obviously very close to a lot of people. And now, Darleen Tana. I don't know if I've missed any. And what are we? We're halfway through the year. That's all this year. I mean, what will the Greens be going through at the moment, do you think, Gareth, with this on top of all of those things?
Oh, well, it's kind of an annus horribilis, right? So the horror year, the worst year since 2005 when they lost Rod Donald, suddenly had a disastrous election, lost a bunch of MPs. So, look, I think people are shocked, maybe a little bit rattled. I still have a lot of friends involved, and, people are there for the right reasons because they really believe in, the urgency of the climate crisis and all the problems we see in our society, from homelessness to inequality to child poverty. If I was still there, I'd be deeply frustrated, right? Because that's what motivated me getting action on the really important things and staying on message. And it's been, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or more steps back. It feels like sometimes the whole year. So I'm sure they're trying to sort of huddle together and be more of a team. This is where you really need to lean on your colleagues and back each other. But they would have been hoping this report, the evidence, which we haven't seen yet, would have been so compelling that it would have been quite a clean break, and they could have, at the mid-year, had a fresh start for the rest of the year. But unfortunately, this horror year continues.
Chewy, you said yesterday, actually, as a part of our panel, I think, talked about the government might be front-loading all this shitty legislation to get it out of the way. I mean, could we say the same for the Greens? All this bad luck is front-loading at this end of the election cycle to maybe give them a great run through to the, whatever it is, 2026. I was thinking, Chewy.
I think the difference between those two examples is I think the government might be purposefully doing this.
Yeah, for sure.
Just a nightmare. I mean, it's just so frustrating on so many points of view. Like I've commented before, because of the Green Party processes and that sort of thing, and their transparency, in contrast to how the other parties run. Yes, it's something good and it's something admirable, but it just, people don't have a frame of reference for it, and so it seems really messy. And yeah, for a lot of people, it is just one more thing going wrong for the Greens. And like, it's another woman, and it's another brown woman, and it's just like, it's so frustrating. I just want better things. Like I see in the chat someone going, well, who's next on the Green Party list? Who is Tana keeping out that could be really good? And I just think if this is just going to be ego of I'm not going, out of spite, which is a very natural human reaction to being called out on something. No, I'm not going to go. I'm just going to sit in the house.
Might not just be ego, it might be financial. Yeah.
And that makes it very uncomfortable, because there'll be a lot of Green voters out there that are going, no, I did not vote for this. I did not vote for you. You don't have a mandate from me. I'm furious at you. I think you're right. She's going to be running a hell of a gauntlet.
Here's a question, Gareth. The party faithful, the Green Party faithful, the ones that turn up to the meetings, the ones that cast votes in the leadership, how will they be reacting how it's currently being handled? You know, because that base of supporters, not the MPs, the people who are part of the party, what will they be thinking right now, do you think? Will they be a bit pissed with the party for not having a stronger hand, or are they kind of keeping the cope opera and going, we're not getting involved with waka jumping, etc.?
Well, I'm a few years out of Parliament and a few years out of the party, so I can't say for sure what's going on, but I imagine
What's your vibe? What's your vibe?
I imagine, on one sense, you can just feel, viscerally the anger and the fury of the betrayal that Chloe Swarbrick is just sort of emanating in her media interviews. I mean, it's pretty incredible that we've kind of got the situation where the leader is, through the media, calling on a former colleague to resign from Parliament. Pretty incredible stuff. I imagine there's deep anger amongst the party, because you're right. A seat in Parliament is an incredible privilege, an incredible space where you can make real change in the world. Like, it's one of the great privileges of my life to spend a decade there, and I'm proud of the good I did. And it's a valuable bit of real estate, and there's only 120 odd of them. So it's taking a seat that potentially someone could make more good in the world. Remember also, there's a huge young cohort in the Green Party that don't remember the big debates of the 2000s with Winston Peters, and Jim Anderson might be a bit of a footnote in history now. You've got to remember that the Greens were founded by Jeanette Fitzsimons and Rod Donald, who are Green Party members of the Alliance grouping of parties, leaving the Alliance because of Jim Anderson's domineering position, not having Green policies in it. They thought they would be better on their own two legs, and they took that risk, and they did it. But had the waka jumping legislation been enforced then, there might not be a Green Party in New Zealand. And it's an incredible fact, I think a bit of an indictment of our Parliament. There's not a single party in Parliament today, or have been in the MMP environment, that didn't have MPs in a previous party. No new party has entered Parliament under its own steam without existing MPs in other parties. So every party has a bit of this history, either from it or to it. And so that might be something that younger members aren't aware of. So, they might be, calling for blood at the moment, wanting a bit of utu, but I would be, just reminding the party of the history, their position. James Shaw in the last term of Parliament actually wrote to the party executive, I understand, saying that we would not be invoking this legislation if we had the chance. So there's a few, hurdles to cross if they want to invoke it. But I still return to that point I made before. This is going to be a miserable experience for an independent MP. She might, be able to stick around, but she's going to be hounded by the media, the public as well. It wouldn't be a pleasant existence.
Yeah. All right. Hey, thanks for jumping in and joining us tonight. You said, as you were talking there, about why you were an MP and a passion for what you're doing. Do you want to tell us a bit about what you're doing, the new aspect of your life? Because that passion that you had for doing good and for what you were trying to achieve as an MP seems to have followed you into the Wellbeing Economy Alliance. Explain to us what it is and you know what you're all about.
Yeah, well, I guess long story short, while I'm involved, is that it's a direct consequence of being in politics for so long. So I've spent a quarter century now trying to make good change with organisations like Greenpeace and Parliament, you know, other organisations I've been part of. And I've sort of reflected when I was living on the island down south that a lot of my work's been really focused downstream, right, on the symptoms, child poverty, climate change, poor housing. You know, what's causing it? These aren't just sort of accidents. They're actually design choices, right, from the economic system that we see it. So that was something I found in politics. There was very little space to think long term, to think systemically, to actually analyze why things are happening in our society. So I teamed up with an amazing group of people from around the world who believe we need to reshape our economic systems to deliver good things by default, deliver them by design, and we kind of need to reshape our economic system. Economics has always changed. You know, it changed in the 1930s with the welfare state, changed 40 years ago with neoliberalism. You know, we've got way different challenges today that we need to respond to, like, you know, planetary collapse and the climate breakdown. We need to make sure that we're, you know, getting those better outcomes. So in New Zealand, we're like a little think tank, little do tank. We're part of the global organization. We've got some amazing ambassadors like Kate Rowth, Tim Jackson, Jason Hickel, you know, global economic thought leaders. And here we focus on, you know, research, policy, advice, trying to change the story on the economy. So last winter, I literally drove around the country in a camper van, talking to ordinary folks about what their aspirations were for the economy. And that was super inspiring for me, because what I heard is that ordinary Kiwis in towns and big cities, you know, rural, urban, they kind of want the same stuff, right? They want an economy that looks after people, where people get a fair go, probably thinks intergenerationally and of future generations. You know, there was a lot of the treaty principles which came out quite strongly. But they're not seeing that expressed in our current economy. So that gives me hope that if we just get ordinary, you know, human values expressed, you know, we'll get better outcomes. And then we do things like conferences and events and, you know, visiting speakers. So yeah, we're a Tītiriti-based movement that's trying to do this big, audacious goal to redesign the economic system. Heaps of people are talking about it. We all sort of know that there are cracks in this current system. They're kind of like giant chasms now. And you probably saw that Ipsos poll that came out earlier this year that 2/3 of Kiwis think the economy's rigged and is broken and geared for corporate interest. And maybe the last thing I'll say is literally this weekend is the 40th anniversary of the 1984 snap election, where we totally redesigned our economy around privatization, corporatization, markets, individualism. You know, that reminds us today that the system's changed before. It can totally change again. It was designed then with some outcomes in mind. It can be redesigned with modern outcomes in mind today. So yeah, people can check out our website if they'd like to get involved with this mahi. I seriously think this is the most important work that I've been doing, because if we get the economy working right, we'll solve so many problems.
Excellent. People want to find out more about you and what you're doing, you guys in general. weall.org, WEALL.org, and then look for New Zealand. It's technically it's /hub/New Zealand. I think I just saw
we've got a new website landing next week, so keep an eye out. They can visit weall.org.nz from next week.
There you go, weall.org.nz from next week. And if you get any of those speakers coming through, fire them our way. Love to chat to a few people there, Gareth.
Yeah, cool.
Hey man, thanks so much for coming and joining us. Exciting to see what you're doing, and we'll look forward to keeping an eye on it.
Cool. Ka kite. Good night.